Hi, you're watching my channel Helen Explains, where I talk about books relating to anti-racism, intersectional feminism and politics. This video is part of my series on Layla F. Saad's Me White Supremacy, which looks at all elements of white supremacy, white privilege, white exceptionalism, white silence, tone policing, loads and loads of different topics. If you want to watch my previous videos, you can do so by clicking up here and also down in the description. This video is day 12 of Me White Supremacy, and on day 12 Layla looks at racial stereotypes. Now, what are racial stereotypes? Stereotypes in general are something that is very sort of overgeneralized and oversimplified, and when it comes to racial stereotypes, these are beliefs that people hold, or maybe these beliefs that are upheld in sort of like the media and in everyday life about people of a certain race. Now, this could be towards black people, towards Asian people, towards white people even. People can have stereotypes about any race. And why should we look at racist stereotypes? Why are they important and to acknowledge? Well, Layla says that racist stereotypes continue to reinforce the idea that those that do not hold white privilege should not be given that privilege because they are other, inferior, and a threat to white civilization. Now, one thing that I think is really important to note that Layla brings up in her chapter on day 12 about racial stereotypes is the difference between prejudice and racism. She says that all people, regardless of race, can hold some level of prejudice towards people who are not the same race as them. A person of any race can prejudice a person of any other race based on negative racial stereotypes and other factors. Prejudice is wrong, but it is not the same as racism. Racism is the coupling of prejudice with power, where the dominant racial group, which in a white supremacist society is people who hold white privilege, is able to dominate over all other racial groups and negatively affect those racial groups at all levels, personally, systemically, and institutionally. Therefore, though a black Indigenous person of colour can hold prejudice against a white person, they cannot be racist towards a white person. They do not have the power which comes with a white privilege and the backing of a system of oppression called white supremacy to be able to turn that prejudice into domination and punishment in a way that a white person would be able to if the tables were reversed. I think that's really important because when the topic of race comes up, there will always be white people who will say, well, I've had racist comments, I've experienced racism towards me, and like black people can be racist towards us. And no, they can't, not when we're living in a white supremacist society. When white people are the dominant race, we have the power. So therefore, it's prejudice coupled with power that produces racism. Black people don't have the power in a white supremacist society, and therefore they have no power and prejudice, and that just equals prejudice. It doesn't equal racism. So Layla says that the enforcement of racist stereotypes in the media and in the collective subconscious is the way in which white supremacy continues to maintain non-white people as other, the ones who should be feared, ridiculed, marginalised, criminalised and dehumanised. Racist stereotypes within white supremacy emphasise again and again that those who are not like us are different and therefore a threat. Now, where does this sound familiar? Oh yeah, what about like 4.5 years ago with Brexit? 2021 and we've now left the European Union, but Brexit was a racist campaign and it used racist stereotypes given by political figures and in the media in order to foster this kind of us and them culture that made people fear refugees, that made people fear people from Europe, made people think that all their jobs, they were going to lose their jobs if we didn't vote leave. And on the back of that campaign, the hate attacks and hate crimes just skyrocketed. People who are British citizens but are non-white British citizens then experience so much hatred towards them, like go back to your own country. The immigrants and refugees and the people who are featured in these campaigns were all black and brown. None of them were white. It's these racist stereotypes that people attach to that then leads people to see all black people in one way or all brown people in one way, and they don't let you see past people's skin colour. So one incident that is a perfect example of racist stereotypes in everyday life is an incident that happened last September towards a black barrister who was in court and she was mistaken for a defendant 3 times in one day. 3 separate people looked at her as a barrister. We don't even know what she was wearing, but regardless of the fact, they looked at her and they assumed because she was a black woman in a courthouse, she must be a defendant. That's the only possible reason why she was there. It's humiliating and it's degrading, and it's that kind of, it's, as Layla was saying, it's this dehumanizing and this kind of assumptions of people that you instantly think they are a certain kind of person, this criminalizing of people. And then 3 months later, in December, it happened again. The courts had to issue another apology because this time a black man got mistaken however many times as a defendant instead of a barrister. The problem with these stereotypes is they are ingrained in us, and the more kind of reassurance and the more solidified they are, the more this is going to happen. Another instance of racial stereotypes that I think is a brilliant example of how ingrained they are in us was an American TV show, about 8 years ago now, that did this, and it proposed some different scenarios with different people all doing the same task and all looking roughly the same. This video on what would you do had a kid, a teenager roughly, stealing a bike. In the first instance, it had a white boy dressed in kind of trackies, a hat, and he had loads and loads of tools in order to cut through this chain. And people walk past him and just say, what are you doing? Is that your bike? Should you really be doing that? Now they do the same scenario with a black teenager. Surprise, surprise, what do you think happens? Within an instant, there was someone on the phone, there was someone shouting at him, there's a crowd gathering. They're all saying, oh, you can't steal this bike, what are you doing? That's not your bike. Interestingly, the TV show has sort of interviews people, and they say well, would your reaction be different if he was different race? And a lot of them no, I don't see the race. No, it'd be the same. But it wouldn't, and that video clearly shows that it wouldn't. They even interviewed 2 black ladies, and they said, plain and simple, you don't think of a white boy stealing a bike. No, you don't, because that's not the racial stereotype. And then they said, well, what do you think about a black boy? We're going to do the same experiment. And they were well, hell's going to break loose. There'll be someone on the phone to the police within an instant. And that's the thing about the stereotypes. We've seen it so much last year in 2020, with the woman in the park who calls the police on a bird watcher. The 2 instances with the barristers, I just want to draw back, come back to that they made news because it was 3 times. That woman's probably not the first time, and it's probably not going to be the last time she'll be mistaken as a defendant. And it's only because she decided to speak up at this point that it made national news, that the outcry came out. But it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change people's views until we really, really dig deep within ourselves and actually challenge these stereotypes, and we start seeing these seeing people of all races in the media, as politicians in different roles, and have diversity everywhere. Because as soon as we do, these racial stereotypes will diminish. You'll see a black person and think, oh yeah, I remember them as a politician, or I remember them as in that position of power. I remember them doing something that was a positive thing, and not just oh, they're a non-white person, so they must be a refugee, or they must be here illegally, or they're a foreigner coming to take my jobs. So why do we need to look at these stereotypes? Well, Layla says that racist stereotypes are used by politicians, policymakers, and the media to justify why certain groups of people should be treated in the way that they are. It is easy to blame those in positions of leadership who drive racist stereotype narratives, but what about the narratives that you are holding that continue to make it acceptable to allow people of other races to be talked about and treated the way they are? Although they are ridiculous when they are said out loud, racist stereotypes fester internally as subtle, dangerous, and logical-seeming reasons that explain why racism is justified. Though you would never say or consciously believe these stereotypes out loud, they do live inside you. And when coupled with the power you hold as someone with white privilege, those prejudices give you the ability to enforce white supremacy. And that's what we mean with, for example, unconscious bias. You're unconsciously biased towards someone because maybe of the stereotypes that you hold about non-white people. it's really important to, when you're in that kind of situation, to challenge it and look at the actions rather than the person's skin tone. For example, when that person's stealing a bike, if it was a black boy or it was a white boy, they're still stealing a bike. Is that your bike? No. Well, then you're stealing that bike. But the amount of times that white boy said, no, this is not my bike, yes, I'm stealing it, people were just like, that doesn't fit with my racial stereotypes, so I'm just going to walk on by because he's probably not doing anything wrong and I don't want to get involved. But then as soon as the black boy said, no, this is not my bike, yes, I'm stealing it, they were like, oh my goodness, yes, black people steal things, so I'm gonna call the police, I'm gonna make this my issue, I have to stand up for justice. It's ridiculous. It shows it there, plain and simple. The important thing with stereotypes is that you can't beat yourself up for having them, because we all have them. What I'm trying to do particularly is to really notice and become aware of it, you know, to dig up my unconscious bias and be like, hang on a second, why am I thinking like that? Why am I thinking negatively about that person, or what assumptions am I making? What are those assumptions based on, and how are they justified, or are they not justified? And I think it's really important to do that in everyday life, because I think it's really important to try and get rid of these stereotypes and to just try and question everything you do and the way you think, because as Layla says, you're probably not going to say these out loud, but they're ingrained in you. And yes, they might be stupid, but that's still influencing the way you're going to act and the way you might treat someone. And though you might have good intentions, your actions may be harmful or hurtful to someone. Thanks very much for watching my channel Helen Explains. This video is all about racial stereotypes. If you want to watch more videos on my series of Me White Supremacy, then you can do so up here. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so here. Thank you very much. Bye.